Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of our Tactical Breakdown series, our show in which we look at the players that have been linked to Arsenal and break them down in a statistical and analytical way with the help of some expert insight. We've been doing this throughout the summer transfer window. If this is your first time watching the channel, where have you been? We've been doing shows every single day, sometimes more than one show every single day. But thank you so much for tuning in for what is a special episode focusing on Oleksandr Zinchenko of Manchester City. David Ornstein of The Athletic reporting that Arsenal are in talks with Man City over a potential deal. Other reports have since come out that there is an expectation that an offer will be made for Zinchenko in the coming days, with Arsenal pivoting away from Lisandro Martinez, who was their first choice option to come in and fulfill that left-back role. But they now see Zinchenko, a player who is very versatile, and you're going to hear a lot about in the coming 10 to 20 minutes or so. We kick off, as always, with our expert insight. I've got not one, but two pieces of expert insight for you guys today. First off, joining us from The Athletic, who broke the story through David Ornstein, is the Manchester City correspondent Sam Lee, who's going to give us a perspective on their side of things.
I suppose the first thing Arsenal fans should know about Oleksandr Zinchenko is the fact that City have tried to sell him in the past, admittedly when his stock was lower, and other teams have tried to buy him in the past. Deals have been agreed, but he just hasn't wanted to go. Earlier in the summer, I think City thought, okay, this summer he'll be available. You know, he'll get offers and we will let him go. And Everton was one of the clubs supposed to be doing that deal. But, you know, as it's gone through the summer, I think it's been made clear that Zinchenko is happy enough to stay at City. Now Arsenal's come along. It is interesting. You know, it will be interesting to see how that changes things. But yeah, he has always been happy to stay at City. Even though City want to sign Cucurella this summer, another left-back, he is supposedly happy to stay and fight for his place and keep doing what he's doing. Now, like I say, the opportunity to go to London, to play with Arteta, in a good team, you know, a challenging team, a young, promising team, that, you know, may turn his head. But yeah, there's no real guarantee that it's going to happen. But obviously, the fact that the clubs are talking, Arsenal will have got some indication that he does want to go, that he does want to make the move. And I personally, my stance on Zinchenko has always been City should keep him for as long as possible. As long as he wants to be there, as long as it makes sense to keep him there, keep him there. It's a fantastic option, great versatility. Not so much in the fact that he's going to play in midfield at City, because he doesn't. He never has done, he most likely never will. That's obviously where he plays for Ukraine, but at City he's a left-back. But that obviously does mean that when he plays a left-back, he can come inside, play in midfield. He's so tidy on the ball, so comfortable under pressure, helps City play through in so many important games. I'm not going to pretend he played so many games last season, because if you look, he only really played when Cancelo wasn't available or had to go and play on the right. But when City, particularly the season before last, and they got to the Champions League final, when they needed to keep the ball, when they needed to cherish the ball and play that really possession-based Guardiola way, Zinchenko was so reliable for that. He's got a great attitude, you know, really good teammate, never complains. I think they said he's like a sponge. The fact that, you know, he's even playing left-back, having started out as a midfielder, being signed as one of these emerging talent players that City Football Group bring in, loan out and sell. They never play for Man City, but this guy does. You know, he was brought in, loaned to PSV. I remember at the start of his second season, he was supposed to go to Napoli. Nobody had known, you know, journalist-wise, if he'd gone or not, because he didn't go through in the end. That was the season he eventually got some minutes at left-back. He's a fighter. He's been described as a sponge in terms of how much he's learned to convert to a left-back. Like I say, he's great on the ball. Defensively, maybe some Arsenal fans saw that game against West Ham at the end of the season, and it was a shocker. He had a horror show. But I'd say that's an exception. He's not amazing defensively, but then again, neither's Cancelo, neither's Trent Alexander-Arnold. You know, they're not terrible. They're not great, but they can do the job. Great on the ball, give a lot to the team. Like I say, great teammate, good guy. I think Arsenal would be getting a really good player if it happens. Like I say, no guarantee really of that, because Zinchenko has always been keen to stay at City. In terms of a fee, at this point, talking Thursday afternoon with the news just coming out, I wouldn't want to speculate. For me, I'd be thinking 40 million plus. Personally, that's what I would want as somebody who watches City and thinks Zinchenko's great. I think you'll be wanting at least 40 million. Yeah, he's a very versatile player. It'd be a great addition. And to that Arsenal team, which is, hopefully from their point of view, moving somewhere, I think he's the kind of guy off the pitch and off the pitch that Arsenal could get a lot out of.
Wow, £40 million plus. I did tweet out early on today that people may be surprised actually how much a move for Oleksandr Zinchenko would cost. I think that Arsenal could get a deal for less than that. I don't blame Sam for wanting that amount of money, because the versatility, the readiness, the Premier League experience, the leading mentality, the international experience, the captaincy experience that Zinchenko has all point towards a player who's now 25 and about to go into his prime. You'd be looking at someone who is worth around that. And when you see someone like Nico Williams at Liverpool leave for £17 million, when you've seen suggestions that some people wouldn't go higher than 20 or even 25 million for Zinchenko, you can start to get a better idea of why the figures are getting between the 30s and £40 million. Now, that's not where our expert insight ends for today's show. We have also got the Ukrainian side of things with British-based journalist Andrew Todos from Zoya Londonsk, who is going to give us a very good insight from the Ukrainian side of things. So listen up.
So, Oleksandr Zinchenko, what exactly can Arsenal fans expect if he was to move? And what's the general reasoning behind a move, him going there anyway? So I think from the start, probably want to focus on where he's been playing for Man City over the past, say, however many number of years at left back. Obviously, he arrived at City not as one. He was more of an attacking midfielder / winger. However, Pep moulded him into a left back. And what this has given him is that on top of the qualities he had back then as an 18-year-old, 19, 20-year-old in attacking, he was able to improve Zinchenko's defensive capabilities. Obviously, they're still not at a level of, a natural defender, but he is very much capable of playing left back very comfortably. And if anything, this has helped him when he wants to play for Ukraine, when he plays in midfield. For Ukraine, he's sort of a mix between a 6 and an 8, I'd say. He's a box-to-box midfielder, essentially. He's involved in both the defensive side of things and in attack. So he'll be breaking down opposition when they're on the break, when they're playing forward. He'll be closing down opponents as well. Can easily play on the press too. Similarly, when obviously defense switched into attack, he'll be the one that will be starting off all of the different sort of forward passes, great at through balls, as we've seen on multiple occasions for Ukraine in recent times. He's got a good eye for a pass, quite composed as well, both defensively and in attack. He doesn't need too much space to operate, but I think he does prefer playing on the left-hand side, where he's able to open up slightly easier than playing maybe inverted on the right, where he's got a bit less time to get out his feet. However, in general, I think he's be a great acquisition. And if he's going to be playing for Arsenal, you'd hope or expect that Arteta has got in mind for him to be playing in those two central defensive midfield spots that currently either Xhaka, Partey, El Neni occupy. So he'll be the one in there. He's got brilliant leadership qualities. That's another thing. He's very used to winning, which will hopefully bring that mentality as well, and hopefully can rub it off on other teammates, as he has done with Ukraine. You know, the fact that he's obviously won so many titles at City has, I think, helped him mentally. It's just the question of whether he is ready right now to sacrifice the potential, you know, for challenging for the Champions League, at least in the nearest future, for more regular playing time, which I think he is very much ready to do. The question is that I think he only wants to do it in midfield. So if he's going to be given that starting position, or if at least he'll be able to challenge for the starting position in midfield at Arsenal, he'll certainly take the move to North London seriously. However, if it's going to be more along the lines of you're going to be a priority left back, challenging Tierney, which I think shouldn't be too problematic personally. I don't think he's going to be so much up for that. Yes, he'll get more game time, but it's still going to be uncomfortable for him, I think, in the long run, just because it's not his position. I think he's got a lot more to offer than playing from left back. Obviously, we've seen that he can attack quite well down that left-hand side, put in some decent balls and assists, as we saw in the final day of the season. He shows up in all of the big games that he plays in, against Chelsea, the likes of Liverpool, some of the other bigger sides in the Champions League too. So it's a question of whether he is ready to move and whether Arsenal have got the right proposition for him. But I think it could work out very well. He's got some friends at Arsenal already. He worked under Arteta, that friend being Gabriel Jesus. It will be interesting if he moves, that's for sure. And he'll obviously most definitely be getting more game time at Arsenal than he would at Man City.
A massive thank you to Andrew Todos, who you can find on Twitter at Andrew Todos, and you can find his work at Zoya Londonsk on Twitter, as you just saw with the panel across the bottom of your screen. And again, a massive thank you to Sam Lee as well from The Athletic for giving us the insight on the latest with Zinchenko. Based off of all of what you've just heard there, and of course, we're going to go into the statistics and comparisons of Zinchenko in just a second, but do leave a comment below as to your thoughts about now hearing more about the player. From my personal point of view, the figures that have been mentioned there, if you can get a player in above around the £30 million mark for the leadership qualities, the quality he brings in versatility, what he can add to both the midfield and the left back position for Arsenal, it would be an invaluable asset of Premier League experience, of winning Premier League experience. And I think we've already seen the impact a player like Gabriel Jesus can have on a team. And I actually agree with Andrew about the link with Tierney. Throughout the summer, I've been saying to you guys, I don't want backups at Arsenal. Backups don't interest me at Arsenal. That's not what I want us to sign. If we sign a player for a position, it needs to be someone that comes in and competes with the existing starter. And Zinchenko competes not only with Tierney, but also with Granit Xhaka or Lokonga or whoever's playing on the left-hand side of that midfield. He comes in and competes with those players. So without further ado, let's go and have a look at the players' statistics. We are going to take these statistics based upon his work at left back, because that was the primary position that he played in for Manchester City. And that means we've got the most available kind of data for that area. But do know that obviously a lot of this we can infer for that central midfield role as well. And the first things you notice are his creativity playing in a left back role, assists in the 99th percentile. And whilst his assists aren't that high, for the players in his position, he is up there with some of the best for creativity, expected assists as well. Passing is excellent. Progressive passing is really good. Progressive carries, both of them in the 99th percentile. He impresses on the top level more than so many players in his position. Moving into the comparison, what I thought would be more beneficial, and I know a lot of people asked, compare him to Lisandro Martinez, but it wouldn't have been contextually fair to do that because Martinez played every game last season at centre-back. Zinchenko played near the majority of all of his games at left back for City. So I will be comparing him to the other potential left backs just so you can get a better idea positionally of how he compares with Grimaldo, who of course was the other left back we were linked to, Aaron Hickey, who's now moved to Brentford and we were linked with earlier in the window, and of course Kieran Tierney, who's currently here. Looking immediately at their heat maps, what you see is the inverted nature of Zinchenko. He, amongst all of the list of these, you can see how much he plays inside, so much more than the others. And that's what Mikel Arteta's been wanting and crying out for from a fullback for so long. He, like Pep Guardiola, wants to use players that are going to play in this inverted way, play more inside, come inside, play those inverted passes, link up with the wingers, overlap, underlap, all of that stuff. He wants a player that's going to do that. And Zinchenko certainly offers that to him. Going into defensive duels, he comes out better than Tierney in regards to the frequency of duels, 5.71 to Tierney's 4.13. But he isn't winning as many of them. Only 50% of his duels he wins compared to Tierney's 62.3. Grimaldo comes out very well here, 7.24 compared to 60.7% success rate on those. And considering Grimaldo's a player who stereotypically is labelled as a poor defender, that might surprise some. Interceptions, though, he comes out very well. The highest on this list with 4.49 compared to Tierney's 4.17. and Grimaldo's 4.35. Hickey, meanwhile, down there with 3.93. Losses, again, he's more conservative. He's only slightly losing the ball slightly less than what Tierney is, 8.89 losses. What is the worrying side of this is 35.2% of those losses are happening in his own half compared to Tierney, who only 28.2% of his losses are happening in his own half. Aaron Hickey, for instance, is losing 50% of his losses in his own half, which is a big, big concern and something we talked about when we did our tactical breakdown on him earlier on in the transfer window. Where he matches this up, though, where he improves amongst the others is recoveries. 11.06 recoveries per 90 is a brilliant return for a fullback. These are numbers that you tend to see from central midfielders, and considering these statistics are taken from the priority position being left back, 11.06 recoveries per 90 is excellent. And what's even better is the fact that the 41% of those recoveries happen in the opposition's half. He loves winning the ball higher up the field. He loves turning over that play, as Pep Guardiola demands of his team, and that is exactly what Mikel Arteta. But the fact that he's got, nearly 5 more recoveries per 90 than Tierney and Grimaldo, and nearly double that of Hickey, is very, very impressive. But the 41% of them happening in the opposition half is really strong indeed. In terms of pressures, unfortunately, FBref don't have the percentage success rate for Grimaldo because he doesn't play in Europe's top 5 leagues, but they do have the number of pressures per 90, which comes out very high for the Spaniard. 13.71 pressures per 90, very strong. Yesterday, we talked with Clive. If you haven't watched my conversation with Clive, make sure you go back and do that. And we discussed how, because Grimaldo isn't necessarily the strongest of defenders, what he wants to do is close that gap and maintain that gap with the attackers that he faces, so he can try and get the ball back quickly. Zinchenko, playing in a City side, doesn't necessarily have to do that anywhere near as much. He's usually got plenty of speed and pace and coverage around him, so he doesn't necessarily have to pressure the same way that Grimaldo does. But he still comes out well and higher than that of Tierney with 8.1 pressures per 90 compared to Tierney's 7.61. But they both have a 33% success rate with those pressures. And what that means is when you pressure a player, if the ball is turned over and the possession is recovered within 5 seconds of that pressure. So 33% of those pressures lead to a turnover of possession within 5 seconds. Passing is where Zinchenko absolutely blows away the competition. 88.4% passing accuracy, really strong. And not only that, but his frequency of passes per game is incredibly high. Playing for Man City, obviously, you're going to be on the ball a lot more, but the accuracy of those passes is good. Now, before you turn around and say, well, maybe those are a lot of sideways passes. Well, if you have a quick look at his passes into the final third, 10.97 passes into the final third is more than double that of any other player on this list. Tierney can only muster 4.98. And when he's doing those passes, not only is he doing them, but he's accurate. 85.5% of those progressive final third passes are reaching the target. Tierney, meanwhile, 69.5%. Grimaldo, 79.3%. And Hickey, 81.9%. But Hickey's only passing 2.18 into the final third, whereas Grimaldo's only doing 5.11. What this shows us is that Zinchenko's a player that's not always going to be obsessed with grabbing the ball and driving forwards with it. And you'll see that from his dribble stats in a second. But what's also impressive is when we look at his passes into the box. He's not just a player that sits back and plays the ball forward for his teammates. He gets involved in the creation and gets involved with it really, really well. 3.9 passes into the box per 90 is only slightly less than Grimaldo's at 3.96, but where he loses out in 0.06 passes per 90, he does make up for that significantly with the accuracy of those passes. 57% of those 3.9 passes into the box per 90 are reaching their target. That's higher than Grimaldo, that's higher than Hickey, and that's higher, most importantly, than Tierney. Crossing slightly falls down here in terms of comparisons to Kieran Tierney, who we know this is one of his best assets. Tierney manages 4.01 crosses per 90 compared to Zinchenko's 2.81. But City aren't necessarily a side that like to cross the ball in the box. And to be honest, Arsenal really shouldn't be. That's not the style that we play to. That's not the strikers that we have to play to. And that's why I like his passes into the box stats as they are. It shows better driven balls. It shows better incisive passes. And I think that's the style that suits Arsenal a lot more. Tierney, I think, could learn quite a bit from the way that in which Zinchenko plays the left-back role, because pinging balls into the box with the players that we have just is not going to cut it next season. And we need to improve how we intricately break down opposition plays with those intricate passes and driven cutbacks from the touchline. Now, if we go into the assists of last season, this is where Grimaldo really starts to show his stats. But of course, contextually, we should point out playing for Benfica in the Portuguese league is going to allow you obviously greater freedom and more opportunities to create assists and score goals. That said, it's still very impressive. 8 assists with an 11.16 expected assist from Grimaldo is exceptionally good. Meanwhile, Zinchenko comes out better than Tierney for last season, playing for Manchester City, of course, with 4 assists with a 2.97 expected assist. Annoyingly, not actually underperforming in a way. You know, some of those assists, it's not underperforming. The way that expected assist works, you know, we're measuring the quality of passes that have created opportunities of goal scoring potential, and he's overachieved in the sense that he's got 4 assists. He was only expected to get 2.97, meaning the passes that led to those goal scoring opportunities, a lot of work was probably done, or it was a long shot that wasn't expected to go in. You know, that's kind of where that sits. But Tierney's quite similar, you know, 3 assists to 2.63 expected assists. I'd hope that Zinchenko playing at Arsenal maybe could be even more creative, but who knows? We'll have to wait and see if that indeed does end up happening. Looking into the dribbles and what they're like on the ball, this is where I said he's not as keen to dribble with the ball at his feet, even though he's technically good and confident with the ball. He likes to let the passing do the talking. That's why he has the lowest amount of dribbles per 90, 1.31 compared to Tierney's 2.8 and Grimaldo's 2.8 and Hickey's 2.57. But when he does dribble with it, he's pretty successful. 51.7% of those dribbles are successful, but it's not close to that of Hickey at 62.4 and slightly less than Tierney's at 56.9%. Progressive runs, though, this is where he takes the ball from one area or third of the pitch into the other. When he does move the ball, it's with purpose. 2.81 progressive runs per game is the highest on this list. 2.23 from Grimaldo and 2.3 from Tierney, the next highest ones. 1.78 just there from Hickey. And the last one that we're going to look at is goals in terms of how many he's scored. He hasn't scored any for Manchester City. Maybe that's surprising for a Manchester City left back. But no, he's not scored. And to be honest, City's whole design is not for left backs and right backs to score. It's to create opportunities for the forward players. So that doesn't necessarily surprise me. Tierney only got the 1 last season, and Grimaldo got 6 for Benfica. Very impressive assist and goal stats for the Benfica player playing in a league that you would probably expect the fullbacks to get more opportunities. Hickey with 5, but a lot of them were quite outrageous goals. I don't expect him to pull off all that amount of goals next season for Brentford. So if you were tempted by his goal tally to start putting him into your fantasy teams, maybe just hold off a second. And that rounds off all of the statistics for Oleksandr Zinchenko. I think you'll agree that he is quite a special player. And if Arsenal are able to get him into the team for a reasonable figure, you're still going to be looking around the 30, 35 million pound mark, I think. If Arsenal are going to be able to get him in, maybe even more. We'll wait and see. Arsenal would be getting a hell of a player if they got Zinchenko, who can be versatile enough to play at left back, at left wing back, at central midfield, at 6, even at 10. But I don't think he will play there, but did play there, of course, for Shakhtar, PSV. And, you know, that's why he was brought in to Manchester City for his forays in that attacking midfield role for Shakhtar before he made that switch and transition into more of a defensive role. This is the type of signing that I would love to see at Arsenal. And I think that Arsenal would be absolutely minded to pay around £30 million for a player of Premier League quality, Premier League winning quality, and so much versatility that it just solves so many problems for Arsenal in the team. Don't let people talk down to you about this player. He's very, very good indeed. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for listening. We're going to take a couple of questions from the chat box before we wrap things up as well, because we like to keep the engagement high, as always. So if you indeed do have any questions that you'd like to ask or any comments that you'd like read out, then make sure you get those in now, and we will tackle those after this swift break. Okay, then, let's jump into the chat and see what some questions you've got. Data for World, stat-based football analysis, which sounds like a very appropriate channel for this video, says, who do you prefer, Zinchenko or Tierney, Tom? For me, Zinchenko is the ideal inverted fullback for Arteta. Tierney isn't an inverted fullback. He's not going to give you what Cancelo or Zinchenko are giving City right now. He's very much an outside player, loves to fed the ball kind of out wide and cross balls into the box, sometimes get to the touchline and cut back if he can. But Arteta clearly is trying to follow a model that he is excited about. And remember that Tierney's one of the few starting players in the Arsenal team that wasn't brought in by Mikel Arteta. It's not surprising at all that Arsenal are looking to bring in a starting quality left back or potentially midfielder in Zinchenko. So Who do I prefer? If Arteta is going to go down the route of playing a system that he feels comfortable with, that he's known from City, and Tierney isn't fulfilling that, then Zinchenko certainly fits that kind of profile of player. But that isn't to talk down about Kieran Tierney. Kieran Tierney is still a very, very good fullback. But as we all know, he just suffers with far, far too many injuries. And that's going to be an issue. I've seen a couple of questions in the chat box asking about his injury record. So I am going to get that up for you, so we can just have a quick check on that now. In terms of 2021, he missed through injury specifically. It says he missed 5 games in September through to October because of an unknown injury. We're not sure what that was, but that was from September to October. He then survived the rest of the season without issue. In 2021, he missed 7 games, 3 with a knock and 4 with another knock. So not, reoccurring problems, just knocks from games, impact injuries, I would assume. He missed 2 games for a muscle injury. That was it. And in 1920, he missed quite a few games because I think he suffered a serious knee problem and had to have surgery on that. So he missed quite a few games in 1920, but has not suffered significant problems since that point. So nothing to worry about regarding injuries. How much is too much? Probably over the £40 million mark, to be honest. I think is probably too much. But I'm at the stage now in the transfer window where I'm just like, well, it's just getting the players, just getting the guys. We need these players in. We need to improve the squad, and Zinchenko certainly does that. Gustavo says, hey, Tom, do you reckon that the stats in the midfield would be different than at left back? Only to a certain extent. Zinchenko stylistically is a progressive player. He wants to get the ball forwards. He wants to get in the box. There's a really good example. If you go and watch the game, and if you want a recommendation of a game to watch of Zinchenko playing in midfield, not only for Ukraine, because obviously you can go and watch lots of games of him playing for Ukraine, but for Manchester City, if you go back and watch the Man City game in which they beat PSG 2-1, Zinchenko played in the midfield in that game and had a very, very good progressive, forward-thinking and creative game in particular. I think he managed 6 passes into the box during that fixture. So it's worth going back and checking that one if you haven't done so already. Let's go to Manu, who says the best partner for Zinchenko, Martinelli or Smith Rowe. I feel like Martinelli was on another level when Saka still played at left back. I think having someone that's enabling you more movement, can overlap, can underlap, I think that works well with Martinelli. Smith Rowe likes to get inside. And because Smith Rowe likes to get inside, he fits quite well with Tierney. Whereas Martinelli and Tierney haven't necessarily been able to strike up the same kind of relationship. Martinelli's got really good at getting to the touchline and playing those cutbacks across. We saw that goal with Nketiah, I think, against Everton on the final day. And we've seen numerous examples of Martinelli getting to the byline and using his left foot that he is comfortable on to get those cutbacks across. And I just think that with Zinchenko, I think that Martinelli would actually benefit from having him over Tierney. Whereas if you've got Tierney, I think you're better off probably marrying him with Emil Smith-Rowe rather than Gabriel Martinelli. I hope that makes sense. It does when I'm saying it, so I'm hoping it does when I'm answering the question. Iron Cub says, with Zinchenko coming in, regardless of where he plays, left back or centre mid, do you think Paqueta would make more sense than Tielemans? It's a good question, and it's something I've discussed. I think, and it's just theory, so don't quote me on this as any kind of inside knowledge, but if we're going to get Zinchenko, I would be surprised if we got Tielemans as well. I feel like it points towards Arsenal pushing for a deal for Paqueta. And to be fair, the indications and reports coming out are that Paqueta is seen as a higher priority than Tielemans is. Tielemans has been seen as a player that Arsenal felt they could always get. A player that was wanting to come to Arsenal, a player that was open to joining, a player that they would have no issues in agreeing personal terms with. But the deal has never, ever been at an advanced stage because Arsenal never put in a bid and still haven't put in a bid for Yuri Tielemans, to the best of our understanding. Last I was aware, haven't put in a bid for the player. If that's changed today, it's changed today. But to the best of my knowledge, have not put in a bid for the player. Paqueta is different. Paqueta is seen as a player that Arteta thinks can kind of complete that Manchester City attacking model where they can have so many attacking players, all rotating, all giving different options, different types of players. Martinelli and Smith Rowe, Paqueta on the left-hand side, who can also Paqueta play left 8 if you wanted him to. Odegaard, Vieira, Saka, who can play central midfield and on the right-hand side. It just gives so much versatility. And with Gabriel Jesus and Nketiah, you've got very mobile, good, clinical finishers. And Eddie Nketiah, doesn't give you much from outside the box, but given the ball in the 6-yard area or around it, he's pretty darn good when the ball's there. So no matter what you might think of Nketiah, when you get the ball to him in those positions, he can be lethal. So I think that we've got a really interesting setup. And if you add Paqueta to that, there's some exciting times, I think, are definitely coming to Arsenal in that regard. We are going to finish up there. Apologies that I'm able to go through more of your questions, but of course I'll be able to tackle more of those questions on Zinchenko in tomorrow morning's 8 a.m. show. If you're new to the channel, we do a show every morning at 8 a.m. bright and early UK time, keeping you up to date with all the latest Arsenal transfer news. And if you've enjoyed this show, we've done plenty of others. We've covered Lucas Paqueta, Yuri Tielemans, of course. We've done ones on players we've signed like Fabio Vieira and Gabriel Jesus. So make sure that you've gone back and given them a watch, because they're definitely worth checking out and give you a better understanding of who these players are. If you could drop a like on the video, I really would appreciate it. If you could share the video around on social media and let your friends know where they can get educated about Oleksandr Zinchenko, then you can do that as well. I really would appreciate it. A massive thank you again to Sam Lee from The Athletic and Andrew Todos from Zoya London. It's got big help for their help on today's show as well. Drop a like, subscribe if you're new, and as always, up the Arsenal. See you soon.